Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for coming. I know what kind of sacrifice it takes to travel long distance. So thank you all for making that effort and being here. I'm going to get started. I want to say real quick thank you to those people that took the time to help out with the shindig at the park last night, and thank you for people that are stepping up to help out for tonight as well, and for the sacrament on Sunday. That was not part of something that we had organized, but there were some people that were willing to step up and do that to make it a little bit more of an enjoyable weekend for everyone. So Micah called me about a year ago and told me he wanted to do a conference on culture and asked if I'd be willing to help. He said he thought it should be in St. George, and I said I'd be happy to, but I didn't really consider I would be talking, but here I am. We all have personal culture, family culture, and community culture. Then there's city, state culture. There's culture from religion, which is primarily driving most culture. But before I get into culture, or before I get into some of my thoughts on culture, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself and my journey. My name's Addison Barlow, if anybody doesn't know me. When I was a kid, there was always a concern about being deceived. We was taught that in the last days that we would be that there would be false Christs, false prophets, and we had to be very concerned about being deceived. But about 20 years ago, there was a man that came along with a testimony that he shared with some of us, and this man wrote a few pamphlets, and I could see this man's testimony was true. I did my own studies, and I could recognize the good things he was saying. But some of my family members and most of my peers, in the religious sense, said this guy was just an imposter and that he would just deceive everyone. So I was very concerned about being deceived, and my family believed that we already had the truth. But we looked forward to a time when the church would be restored. I came from a family that we believed that there was no prophet on the earth. There was no leader, but we believed that there would be a man called in the last days, that he would be the seventh president. This was our belief system, because we believed that after Joseph F. Smith, that was the last actual prophet. That's how we saw it, and so we look forward to this man called in the last days, whoever that is, right? So we were always being concerned about this future leader, but also being concerned about being deceived by all these false prophets. The people I worship, like me, were so afraid of deception that they could hardly even be willing to see outside of their box. And most of them would not even hear this guy's testimony, and that bothered me. I was worried about being deceived as much as anyone, but I could tell that this guy's testimony was true, and that what he taught in the Book of Mormon was very enlightening to me. The people in my circle told me this guy was way off. He was deceived. He was just another imposter. And if I followed this guy, which I had no intentions of following anybody, or following this guy especially, I would be deceived. The scripture that was always quoted was Matthew 11:6. I believe there are a lot of beliefs or unbelief that start with a really good thing, often scripture. But when we couple that with men's wisdom, we fall into traps like being told we just need to keep the faith, go to church, do all the things that pious people do, and because we already have all the truth, and we'll be saved, and everyone else is going to be deceived. The problem with that thought is that I realized that every other church thought the same thing. I pondered this dilemma for a long time. Both the concern of being deceived and this end-time leader. One evening while reading the scriptures, I don't remember exactly where, but the thought came to me that if I put my trust in God, I have nothing to worry about being deceived. I knew at that point in time in my life that I didn't have to worry about any of that so long as I don't put my trust in man. The scripture that came to mind was 2 Nephi 12:6. Says, and they, cursed is he that putteth his trust in man, or maketh flesh his arm, or shall hearken to the precepts of man, save their precepts shall be given by the power of the Holy Ghost. From that day on, I had no reason to be afraid of deception if I put my trust in God. And that being afraid was just another facade to keep me from searching. Another thing I realized, that unless this future leader that we all talked about was an actual relative of mine or my relatives, they would never consider it. I could see the idolatry in looking for this leader. In a sense, we followed man as much as any group, just in a different way. I started to see the personal responsibility that every person has, that we could not rely on a leader because that would be putting my trust in man, and ultimately was idolatry, even if it was a future leader in our case. So one day I was reading in D&C 1, and the thought came to my mind and showed me that in order for Zion to be established, a people would have to start taking on the responsibility to know the Lord for themselves, and possibly even gather to a degree. This was the thought I had. And that the Lord would use a servant, but not a big leader, that everyone gets their answers from. The individual would continue to be responsible for their own knowledge and understanding of the truth. At the time, I didn't understand what a servant's job would, or a priest's job would be, but I understood there was a purpose, but that this person or servant would not be above anyone else and would only have the responsibility to teach or minister. In my mind, until then, I thought there had to be some kind of a hierarchy. So fast forward about 12 years from that time, and I hear about this guy named Denver Snuffer who says that that plural marriage is not of God, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, and that this and their people got rid of Section 132. And I thought, well, what a bunch of quacks, because I know that's not true, right? Fast forward another 5 years, and my brother gives me a call and says, hey, I really think you should look into this movement, and I think that I know you enough to know that you do want to know what the Lord's doing, and you really ought to look into this. I mean, we had a good long conversation, but at the time I was ready to prove it wrong and let him know it's all BS. But when I got home, I decided that I would read in Ezekiel where my brother suggested. After reading it, I knew I wanted to be a part of those people that were talked about in Ezekiel who would repent and be on that journey to salvation that the Lord himself would lead. I even marked in the scriptures at the time in Ezekiel how many times it said I, meaning the Lord, would lead. It was 13 times. And although he would have a servant named David, it would be the Lord that brought us out of bondage. The description in Ezekiel fit what the Lord showed me years prior, and it was what I wanted to be a part of. I was concerned that this people my brother was talking about was just following some imposter. That night I felt such a desire to follow God, and if he was leading a people and it wasn't about some big strong man leader, I wanted to be a part of it with all my heart. So I knelt down and poured out my heart. I had a bit of feeling worried about deception, and I just pleaded with the Lord that he would protect me from that. And I told the Lord I would move forward as a little child and I would let him teach me. And so I felt like that the 10 Talks would be a great place to start. So I started there. And I figured I would not make any kind of decisions until I finished those 10 talks, and I wanted to finish before the Arvada talk, which was about 4 months later. Since then, I've had a lot of paradigm shifts. I mean, a lot. I think we all can understand how that is. And I believe that if I got something wrong, if I'm walking in humility and trusting in the Lord, my course will be corrected, at least eventually. And thank God I have a whole lifetime to work on this. I think when we worry about deception, we keep ourselves from growing and learning. I do want to note that if my heart was softer back in 2017, I would have been there at that conference where the covenant was taken. My wife's heart was soft enough, and she would have been there, but I wasn't ready for that. So I needed a few more years, and I still needed to awaken to my awful state. So I want to point out that trusting in the Lord, it must be coupled with a soft heart in order to progress. When I was 31 years old, I had something devastating hit me and my family. I was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma. We had a 12-month-old baby and 4 more little kids. I grew up believing that the medical industry was just was all corrupt. I mean, I still think it mostly is, but I believe that chemotherapy was almost a sin, and that going to conventional medicine was of the enemy. I figured I would just heal naturally, but I was at a stage 4, and even a naturopath doctor that I knew who had done enough studying, he says that the best way to cure this is through conventional medicine and not naturally. Some of my own family members, my own belief ideas, and other naturopath doctors told me that if I did go get chemotherapy, I would certainly die. And I thought, if I can muster enough faith, I'll just heal naturally. I had to put my trust in the Lord entirely, because at this time in my life depended on it, and I knew it. For those of you that don't know, stage 4 is once you get to stage 5, it's over. You're moving on. So I was right there at that brink. I had to really dive in, and I had to rely on God, even if it meant getting treatment from what I saw as the enemy. If I would have done what I wanted to do, I'd be 6 feet in the ground right now. So I did chemotherapy. So back to culture and some of my thoughts. So Micah reminded me of a statement that I had made a while ago. He says that I didn't want to trade my culture for your culture. We both agreed that the current corrupt culture we came from would be inadequate, and replacing one corrupt culture for another corrupt culture would be keeping us from progressing. We as a people would need to adopt a whole new culture. Our current corrupt cultures will need to be left behind. Now, who am I to stand up and tell anyone something about what our culture should look like and how to create a righteous culture? But I will do my best to share at least some of what I have learned and how I see it. I feel like my thoughts on this are continually developing. And I am hopeful that I can at least spark thought in others to not only recognize the need for a new, better culture, and perhaps be able to look closely at ourselves enough to see what is corrupt in our culture and seek to change in whatever way we can. I believe that ultimately a large part of our current corrupt culture is derivative of the great and abominable church, which is responsible for the stumbling blocks that have plagued us with the Babylonian ways. The world does not even recognize that there are plain and precious things taken out of the Bible. Even the people that accept the Book of Mormon, very few of them, at least I believe, even understand what those plain and precious things are. I believe that is something worth studying to try to understand. If we could recognize the plain and precious things that are missing in the Bible by studying the Book of Mormon or covenant of Christ, would we be able to understand the principles that are wanted? Would we be able to pattern our lives after it? And would it begin to build a culture in ourselves and as a people that would produce a people prepared for the Lord to come? That abominable church not only teaches that you must have a strong man hierarchy, but that puts one man above another in every degree possible, making it impossible for equality to have a people of one heart and one mind. I want to remind you of a paragraph in the Civilization Talk given by Denver. This is on page 9. Society is broken. Society is broken. Everywhere we see corrupt cultures, based on corrupt laws, corrupt religions, corrupt values, and ultimately corrupt thought. Beginning again requires re-civilizing people. To be free from corruption requires a change in thinking. If the Lord is to accomplish this, there will need to be a new temple at the center of that new civilization. End quote. I realize that to truly have a culture completely free of corruption, we need a temple. But apparently that comes after all we can do to learn and change and shake off our corrupt cultures or false traditions. We need to be of one heart and one mind. And I believe that idea is a massive cultural shift in and of itself. Apparently we're not there yet. I personally believe that we will be eventually if our desire is perfect and if we put our trust in God and our hearts are soft. As Mike and I talked about this concept over the months, one of the observations was that a positive, non-corrupt culture needed to be organic, that any kind of coercion in any degree would send a new living culture the wrong direction and would lead to corruption. This is why it is a personal shift, and then it can be a family, then in a community. I can look around at the different cultures in the world today, and I've visited many of them, and I can see that even though they might think that they are the most correct or the most like God, none of them have produced Zion. In fact, none of them have even produced equality, something that we are asked to do in this dispensation. I told Micah that I had been learning a lot from a psychologist named Dr. Addison, and can see how my family culture has been shifting dramatically and has brought on a lot of good, and mentioned I would love to have him speak, teach us one of his lessons. I thought to myself that if that happens, it would be a gift or a miracle. From God, as far as I knew, this Dr. Addison would not do public speaking. When I was a kid, the people that I went to church with would always say in their prayers, "Thank you for making the gospel of Jesus Christ a part of my life." That always rubbed me a bit wrong, so I would always say, "Thank you for making the gospel of Jesus Christ my whole life." I believe that in order to have a culture built on correct principles, we must live every principle in its entirety. Otherwise, corruption will take hold easily. We need to be brutally honest with ourselves and accountable with ourselves and about ourselves. Here are some of my thoughts or ideas that let you ponder. That if we truly lived by these things and made them not just part of our lives, but lived them more completely, would it make the difference? This is in Alma, chapter 10, verse 2. It says, "Now, my friends, I advise you to humble yourselves before God and show by your conduct that you have really repented, so that you can also enter into that rest. Humble yourselves like the people in the time of Melchizedek, who was a high priest of this same order I discussed, who also took upon himself the high priesthood continually." Skipping a little bit forward. "Now this Melchizedek was a king over the land of Salem, and his people had waxed strong in iniquity and abominations. Yea, they had all gone astray. They were full of all manner of wickedness." I want to couple that with the words in Isaiah from the covenant of Christ. It says, "And I did it because I knew you were stubborn, and you refused to bow your neck or your hard head like brass." I wanted to highlight the part where he's saying that Melchizedek's people recognized that they waxed strong in iniquity and abominations, had all gone astray, and were full of all manner of wickedness. This people humbled themselves, showing their repentance by their conduct, being brutally honest with themselves continually. I believe that we are here because we have awakened to our awful state, which is a good thing. I wonder, though, how quickly human nature kicks in and we forget that we have gone astray and we still carry with us all manner of wickedness, and we tend to say, oh, we're not so bad. We do good things. We have learned a lot and grown a lot. We have a name, so we're good. Oftentimes our brow is like brass, not allowing greater understanding to come in. I think it's part of our current corrupt culture to let the ego step in and say, well, we're not as bad as the next guy, as if that's adequate. Here's another thought. Joseph Smith defined Mormonism in this way. One of the grand fundamental principles of Mormonism is to receive all truth, let it come from whence it may. I think that doesn't just mean truth in the religious sense, but in anything. It is all truth we must receive, even if it does not resonate with us or fit our narrative. Here's another one from Proverbs 1:8. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Be not wise in your own understanding, or in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It shall be health to your navel and marrow to your bones. It is human nature to think we don't need to counsel with the Lord in everything we do. Here's a quote from the Covenant of Christ from the king of the anti-Nephi Lehi's, followed by a comment in the Civilization Talk. When the king had finished saying these things, and all the people were assembled, they took their swords and weapons used to kill people, and they buried them deep in the ground. They did this precisely because it was in their view a testimony to God and to mankind that they would never use weapons again to kill people. They did this pledging and covenanting with God that rather than killing their brethren, they would lose their own lives, and rather than take away, they would give to their fellow human beings, and rather than being idle, they would work hard with their hands. As you can see, when these Lamanites were brought to accept and know the truth, they were determined and would even suffer death rather than commit sin. And we saw they buried their weapons of war, or weapons of peace, or rather they buried their weapons of war for peace. Now this is Denver's comments on this in the Civilization Talk. We are not being asked to lay down our weapons and be killed. We are only being asked to lay down our hostility, slander, and abuse of one another and to become peaceful and loving. I think this is coupled with the words in Isaiah, again, 2 Nephi 8:4, Covenant of Christ says, and they shall exchange their swords for plowshares and their spears for pruning hooks. Nation won't take up sword against nation. They'll never again experience war. I want to contrast that with what the Book of Mormon says, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares. And it says, neither shall they learn war anymore. I've been trying to figure out how to lay down my sword. We are living in a time where there is a ton of information. And if we are looking, we can find tools. Apparently, we can exchange attacking and warring with one another with cultivating relationships. Even in the process of learning how to beat or exchange my weapons of war into tools, I still find myself using the sword and sometimes being hurtful. I believe in the answer to prayer for covenant has a ton of instruction, especially if I apply everything personally. In that scripture it says, For there are those who are humble, patient, and easily persuaded. Nevertheless, people who are quarrelsome and proud are also among you. I take that to mean that both are a description of myself, and that the Lord is telling me to focus on myself and not try to point out in other people what I think they might be, one or the other of those descriptions. Because I know that if I do, I will begin to be self-righteous, and what comes after self-righteousness is beating your fellow servant. To sum up some of these thoughts, trusting in the Lord, accept all truth, awaken to my awful state, throw off incorrect traditions, and continue to be awakened, be softened to greater understanding, light and truth, humility, bury weapons of war for peace, exchange weapons for tools, and ultimately be completely honest and with ourselves and to one another. A couple years ago, I was in a discussion about whether conflict was bad or not, or bad or good, acknowledging that contention and disputation was not of God, but recognizing that there was a need to continue the conversation even if it was heated. Staying in the ring, if you will, even if you get punched. But at the time I had an experience, or rather I was actually experimenting to some degree. I was arguing a point with somebody very close to me, and it got heated. Emotions were flying, and I thought, I'll just keep pushing, see if I can get this resolved. But that backfired, leaving both of us, both myself and the other person, wounded. After that, because of this conversation, my mind was in that fight, flight, freeze mode, where I started to go in my mind where this person, all the negative things about this person, everything I can think of, I started thinking all the bad things, and I started coming to the conclusion, well, this person must be just bad. They're just bad, okay? I began to devalue this person. Then the thought came to me. At that moment, I was guilty of contention. It wasn't the arguing, it wasn't the disagreeing. It was at that moment I started to devalue that person. And what I was doing was exactly what the Lord warned against. I don't think it's wrong to disagree or duke it out about an idea, but when we begin to attack another person's worth or allow our worth to be attacked, that is when we are partaking of the spirit of contention, even if it's in our thoughts. In the Teaching and Commandments, section 31:15, it says, "And it shall come to pass among the wicked that every man that will not take up his sword against his neighbor must needs flee to Zion." We can look at this literal or as a metaphor, or both. If you will not take up your swords with your words, you will have to flee to Zion. In this thought being a place of knowledge, skill, emotional maturity, where you do not get bullied and where you will not bully. I grew up believing that psychology, psychiatry, and therapy are all the same thing, and they're all just a bunch of shrinks and quacks, and I still think probably most of them are, but there are some good. I believe that religious people tend to think that mental health is unnecessary. I was one of those that believed that for a long time. I am convinced now that if we recognize the importance in this stuff, mental health, we would recognize it as part of the path. We would study it just as much as the scriptures, or at least recognize what, if any of it, is in the scriptures. When I started listening to the Insanity podcast, I started to pick up a ton of tools which changed my view on life. Some of those include mindful practice, how to grieve, deep work, emotional myths, satya, how to regulate my nervous system, and so many more excellent instructions, like the simple concept that you can't be spiritually mature unless you're emotionally mature. What a thought. However, with the things I was learning and having my eyes open to with these tools, I still had some family dynamics that were very difficult, to say the least, and trying to lay down my sword seemed impossible. In fact, learning some of these things made me recognize that my own family culture and ultimately my understanding was way off. And I realized I needed some personal coaching. And so, thanks to Stephanie for suggesting in her podcast, I was finally willing to and open to the idea of working with a coach, basically. Mind you, I'm the religious person that would only read scriptures. I had to turn it over to God, remembering that if I put my trust in God, I had nothing to fear about being deceived, even if it's from a psychologist. I knew about a few psychologists, a few people, a few counselors, and one stood out to me, and his name was Dr. Addison, We're going to be seeing him talk here in another 30 minutes. And when I went to see him, I laid out all my struggles, everything I was dealing with, and I really had no idea where this would go. I just trusting in the Lord. But on my next visit, when I walked in the door, he had his whiteboard completely full and ready to just give me some lessons, give me some tools. I mean, this guy was ready to go. And one of the first things he told me, he says, well, I need you to remember that even though you know you're lucky to have your children are lucky to have you. He says, do not parent in fear. He also told me that his goal was for me to have more joy. And if I practice these skills, I will have more joy. He taught me that my kids need to see themselves as an extension of me, and we need to be an extension of one another. I think this is a correct principle that we can apply to any relationship. He taught me that investment leads to gratitude, and gratitude leads to happiness. I went home as the new sheriff in town. Of course, that really didn't go over well. It took another year of lessons, trial and error, and how to use some of those tools. I had to get my hands dirty and do the work, and this stuff is hard work. Thankfully, all of the adults in my family, my wife and my older kids, since then have gone to learn some of these same skills, and it helped to be pulling in the same direction. I have watched my own family culture improve dramatically. Believe me, I know we have a long ways to go to become a Zion people. But I know that we have more joy in our home than we did before. And I know that my self-esteem has increased dramatically. Dr. Addison has put a lot of effort into his lessons, and from my perspective, is very sound information, and if not all, at least most is scriptural. He wrote a book that covers some of these lessons. He's going to have that book here later that anybody can purchase if they'd like to. I think it would be to anyone's advantage to study this book if you're seeking to learn about how to have better relationships, or perhaps change your personal culture as well as your family culture for better. I want to say that Dr. Addison is a rare find. And Stephanie is a rare find. Not all people in mental health are created equal. It would be like saying all lawyers are honest just because we know one that is. I've lived in and been a part of a community based on learning how to work together. But by the time I left that community, which was based on religion as well, I wanted nothing to do with a religious community. I had no desire to work with other people in a common cause. I just wanted to be left alone and do my own thing. In fact, I found a lot of success that way. But when I began to rub shoulders with this people, even though I'm willing to follow God, I was triggered by many things, and it made me just want to not get into it with anyone. In fact, somebody asked me if I had thick skin, and I said, yeah, I have thick skin, and not very far into conversation, I found I did not have thick skin. I was just going to steer clear of anything that would put me in a position to be ran over the top of, or would have to get into, or I would have to get into uncomfortable disagreements. Even fellowshipping was hard for me. The things I learned from Dr. Addison, coupled with the things Stephanie has been teaching, I have felt much more confident in relationships and nowhere near as triggered. I think that I can now move forward in more relationships and even community. I now have a better idea of what to look for and how to react in my communication with others. I think that one of the corrupt parts of our culture is that we devalue ourselves, and in turn we devalue one another. When we disagree, we think that we have to devalue someone. When someone disagrees with us, we think they are attacking us, then we begin to think less of ourselves after we're attacked. When someone points out their understanding, even if it's assumptions on their part, it does not mean they are attacking you, even if you feel those emotions. Dr. Addison gave me an analogy that I want to use. He says, if you have a glass of water and I put a few drops of deadly poison in it, would you drink it? Would anybody drink it? I don't know if anybody would drink that. But if I had a peach, and it was a perfectly ripe peach, but it had a blemish on it, and I gave it to you, would you eat it? Yeah. And eat the peach. I think to get it right, and we want to get it right so bad. Blemish. See that? Because we want it. And I think that's a good thing. I think you were all peaches. With blemishes? Yeah, we all have blemishes. As I mentioned before, I think the Great and Abominable Church plays a massive part in the culture today. I believe it starts with hierarchy or kingship in the way that Gentiles do kingship, having one man above another. I do believe in mentorship, but when you look up to someone in authority or power or celebrityism, I'm not talking about admiring somebody's Christ-like traits or having respect. I'm talking about idolatry to any degree. I think that you will actually begin to look down on someone else. What is so interesting about this is that you will immediately begin to fear that person who you look up to or down to one degree or another. How can you love your neighbor as yourself unless you're looking at them with inequality, straight across, not up or down? You can't love your neighbor as yourself if you're practicing idolatry. And someone is better than you because you will immediately see others as less than you. Comparison is what feeds the ego. I learned that also from Dr. Addison. In the first 3 verses in the Restoration Scriptures, in Genesis, the Lord said to Moses, and I'm going to skip a little bit, I am the Lord God Almighty, and endless is my name, for I am without beginning of days or end of years. And is this not endless? I have a work for you, Moses, my son, so skipping forward, and you are in the similitude of my only begotten. In this account, the Lord calls Moses his son 3 times. First, he introduces who he himself is, God, and calls him his son, and saying he has a work for him, and saying that he is the son of... First, he introduces who he is, then calls him his son, and saying he has a work for him to do, and saying that he is in the similitude of the only begotten. The Lord is communicating 4 very important things. He is saying he, God, is important, so listen up. He's introducing himself. Then he says, Moses, you are important. And then he says, I have a purpose for you. I have a work for you to do, a purpose. And then he says, you are made in the image of my only begotten. Who is the only begotten? Christ. He is perfect. Okay? We are made of the same material, of the finest material. I believe that this is God giving Moses or informing Moses of his identity. Then the Lord leaves in this account. Moses then recognized that man is nothing, which thing he never supposed. We think of the word nothing as in terms like, I have nothing to eat, but there's a little bit of ingredients in the fridge and in the cupboard. But in this account, nothing is nothing. 0, zilch. There's not 1 penny in the bank. That means nothing. Okay? Satan came, tempting him, saying, Moses, son of man, worship me. What is man? Nothing. What is Satan is saying? Son of what? Son of nothing. What is Satan doing here in this account? He is devaluing Moses. He is trying to strip him of his identity, telling him he has no purpose, telling him he has absolutely nothing. He's also telling him to worship him. That doesn't necessarily mean satanic worship. That just means make bad choices, follow the natural man. After this, Moses, who at first was scared, used what God gave him as tools to crush the devil, showing all of us how to do the same thing. He is saying, and then he says to the devil, he says, I am the Son of God, in the similitude of his only begotten. He also said, God told me to call upon God in the name of my only begotten and worship me. Again, Moses said, I will not cease to call upon God. I have other things to inquire of him. Showing how Moses used all three things that God gave him as tools. He is important, he is made with the finest material, and that he has a purpose. I think that account is telling us that we are important to God, and we are made with the finest material, and we have a purpose. There's much more in this account that I think is well worth studying. In the answer to prayer for covenant, it says, we, like Satan, accuse. I think accusing is another way of devaluing someone, or saying we have no purpose, or we're not worth much, or anything. And I think we do this to ourselves probably more than others do to us. The cool thing about this account, which is literally the first 3 verses in all of the restoration scriptures, and if we applied these techniques, we would have greater self-esteem, and the result would be thick skin. We would also begin to stop using our swords and spears, maybe pruning hooks and plowshares only to prune off bad behavior, being assertive, not bullying anyone, and not allowing someone else to bully you. We can prune bad behavior and still treat one another as an identity. God already gave us an identity as individuals. He showed us that in the first 3 verses I just mentioned. We are his sons and his daughters. He already won that battle and obtained victory over death in the Garden of Gethsemane. I believe that is how he gave us our identity, or was able to give us individual identity. A year ago, God gave us as a people an identity, calling us covenant Christians, which I believe is different from the individual identity we already have. When I stood up and accepted that name, I looked around to all of those that did the same, and something changed for me. I had already accepted the covenant, which in part is an agreement that we will bear one another's burdens. But when I stood up with you, I realized that I had barely looked at you in this light, and barely looked at you as family. I made friends to that point, and looked at them as brothers and sisters, but I hadn't looked at the whole body this way. I made a decision then and there that I would be more committed to fellowship and recognizing all covenant Christians as the Lord's covenant people, and I would repent of my pride in having respect for persons. I decided that if the Lord exercises faith for the covenant Christians, I would respect his plan and would exercise faith too. My hope for this talk and this conference is that as a people, we will begin to see the many gifts the Lord has given us, both in knowledge and wisdom, scriptural and mental health, and we will recognize our identity and that we really are seeking to follow the same Lord, and that we would be grateful that we are a part of something that is bigger than us, that we will recognize how to value, how valuable we are in the eyes of God, and that if we realize that, then we might value one another the way God values us. I think the Lord knew what he was doing when he offered a covenant. He knew what culture we all came from. and he has given us more than enough to be on that path with him that was talked about in Ezekiel that I referred to earlier. I want to end with a quote from Joseph Smith in T&C 151:18. Brethren, shall we not go on in so great a cause? Go forward and not backward. Courage, brethren, and on to the victory. Let your hearts rejoice and be exceeding glad. Let the earth break forth into singing. Let the dead speak forth anthems of eternal praise to the King Emmanuel, who was ordained before the world, that which would enable us to redeem them out of their prisons. For the prisoners shall go free. Let the mountains shout for joy, and all you valleys cry aloud, and all you seas and dry lands tell the wonders of your eternal King, and you rivers and brooks and streams flow down with gladness. Let the woods and all the trees of the field praise the Lord, and you solid rocks weep for joy, and let the sun, moon, and morning stars sing together, and let all the sons of God shout for joy, and let the eternal creations declare his name forever and ever. That's it. Thank you. I'm going to stay up here and introduce Dr. Addison. Before we get started, I want you guys to know that he's got a couple of handouts for both of his talks, both of his presentations. His first presentation, there'll be one handout, so we'll get started on handing those out. I've got a whole bunch of pens for anybody that wants to write down notes. He will be expecting you to write down some notes. There's certain parts of his presentation that you'll need to do that. What else? We'll get passing those around, so just being aware of that. I was kind of hoping I would end a little bit early, which I did, so that I could just introduce Dr. Addison and then we can get going. So just want to see if he's ready. Are you ready? Okay, he says thumbs up. So, all right. Dr. Addison was born to L. James and Deanne Addison. He was born and raised in the Los Angeles area of California. He has two older sisters and one younger brother who is deceased. He is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from October 1982 to April 1984. He served his mission service in New York and Lisbon, Portugal missions. Having been originally called to serve in Brazil mission. I can't say that. Maybe Dr. Addison can tell you. Visa difficulties prohibited him from serving there. After his missionary service, he attended Brigham Young University and obtained his bachelor's degree in psychology. While there, he met and married Blythe Hemming of Poway, California. They married on July 26, 1985. Woo! Sheesh. Sorry. For his graduate work, he attended the University of North Texas and received his master's degree and PhD in clinical psychology. He interned at the Salt Lake VA Hospital from September of 1992 to September of 1993. From September of 93 to March 97, he worked for the Center of Family Development as a therapist and later as a program director of sex offender domestic violence treatment program. While director of this program, he worked with victims and offenders of sexual abuse and violent crimes. These clients came from the probation and parole system. Dr. Addison opened a private practice here in St. George in March of 1997 and has worked there ever since. He treats a variety of clients, primarily with individuals, couples, and families, late adolescents, and adults. Dr. Addison treats those with depression, anxiety, worry, anger, resentment, bipolar disorder, or low self-esteem, marital problems, couples issues, infidelity, parenting issues, family of origin issues, unhealthy relationships, self-damaging behaviors, personal disorder, pornography, and alcohol and drug dependence. Quite a list of things. Dr. Addison has conducted thousands of psychological evaluations for the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation Services and Social Security Disabilities Services for the state of Utah. He has also served as a medical expert witness for the Social Security Court of Hearing and Appeals. Dr. Addison and Blythe have been married for 40 years and have 5 children, ages 37 to 21. He is a grandfather of 6 and enjoys his role in his life. Enjoys this role in his life. He and Blythe love to make homemade beef jerky and fruit leather from their apricot and peach trees. Hence the analogy of the peach. He is a rabid BYU Cougar fan and has not found any successful treatment for this. He loves to follow a variety of sports and spending time with Blythe, traveling, working together in the yard, rock hounding, attending the temple fanatically, and serving in their various church callings. Please welcome Dr. James Addison.
Thank you.
You ready?
You were great. I like this. Thank you very much. That can't be too bad. I'm honored to be here, and I'm grateful for the introduction. I wrote it, so I should be grateful for it. And I'm honored that Ianthus would have me come speak here. I hope that what I say is helpful. I don't have to be right. I don't, but I like to be helpful, and I'm really hoping that this is a good use of your time. I do have some handouts that are going to go out, and I have found that as people take notes, they're able to get more out of the discussion. They're able to get more of the discussion and apply it more to themselves, but you use the handouts as you would like. To introduce the first topic, if you talk about sports, people enjoy sports quite a bit, but people have different approaches to sports. And some people will say winning is everything. And real competitors, they're there to win. The next person will say, nah, I don't think so. I think as long as you're having fun, that's what's really important, as long as you're having a good time. And then the third person says, nah, I don't think so. As long as you display good sportsmanship, you shouldn't be a jerk out on the tennis court or out on a golf course. Like, as long as you display good sportsmanship, that's what's most important. Well, that's 3 different ways of approaching a sporting event, and every person is going to feel like the way they're doing it is the correct way of doing it. And for this first hour, I want to talk to you about boundaries. And people will tell you, oh, you got to set your boundaries, and talk show hosts and radio show hosts, you got to have appropriate boundaries. You got to set your boundaries. But they don't say what they are. And a lot of times when people will say, well, this is my boundary on this or that's usually oftentimes more of an ultimatum. So we're going to talk about today boundaries as filters through which you can apply your social experiences. And with these filters, it doesn't matter what your background is, or gender, or religion, ethnicity, it doesn't matter. These boundaries will work for anybody if they'll just use these as a template for their daily life. So let's see if I can hit one button and get it right. I got it right. All right. So this is the time they're going to pass out the handouts for you to have. We're going to give it a couple minutes. And there's something you'll notice that's not on the handout that's on the top of this slide. For the most part, the slides and the handouts are identical. But can you hear me in the back? Am I loud enough? We good? Okay, great. The first thing I want to tell you is never try to please another person. Never try to make another person happy. And never means never. No exceptions. It will just cause heartache for you and the other person. And so you're looking at the people pleaser of Southern California. I think I have 5 years of trophies for being a people pleaser in high school. Like, that's what I did. But there's negatives that come with being a people pleaser for both parties. So never ever try to make another person happy. Never ever try to please another person. So when I say that to young couples in my office, they're like, oh my gosh, this guy is so stupid. Like, that's all I try to do is make my husband happy. That's all I try to do is make my wife happy. My whole life, I've just tried to make my parents happy. Then I'm saying, don't do it. Please don't do it. Instead, what I want you to do, what I suggest you do, is always be caring. And you can see up there in that pink slide there on the left, always be caring. Caring means be kind, be loving, be protective, show integrity. In my mind, integrity means be honest, loyal, trustworthy. I call it LHT. Be honest, loyal, trustworthy. Be responsible. Be reliable. Selfless serving. Serving because you like to, not because there are strings attached. Be teachable, be humble, be teachable, be willing to learn. Be responsible, be reliable, be hardworking, be obedient, be obedient. Being obedient means being a we, not being a me. Being a team player, being able to be a team player, not just doing things your way. And then the final quality, be sincere or real or genuine or transparent. They're synonyms, whichever one of those you like. So that's how I've defined caring. That's what you need to be. As a husband, as a father, as a wife, as a mother, as a son, as a daughter, as a brother, as a boss, as an employee, as a congregant, as a neighbor. In all situations, always be caring. But that's all you have to do. There's a lot of good qualities that I did not mention. I don't have the Scout Law. I don't have clean, brave, and reverent on there. I don't have be generous, be humorous. There's a lot of good qualities that I didn't list. And you can be those if you want. But this is enough. If you do this, your job is done. That is your part. You're to do your part. Okay? So if you're learning the violin or the piano or tennis or horseback riding or golf, we take lessons. And the purpose of taking lessons is to learn good form, learn good technique, right? That's all you have to do is demonstrate good form, good technique. That's all you have to do. You don't have to please anybody. You don't have to make anybody happy, but you do have to treat them well. Regardless of your mood, urges, or appetites, you have to always be caring. Okay, you got to show. You don't have to please them. You don't have to make them happy, but you do have to treat them well. Okay, and that's what. And so that middle thing there, that's supposed to look like a boundary or a wall. My daughter put barbed wire on it. I think she's got an East Berlin, West Berlin design there, but don't look across that wall. Once you've gone to that wall, that boundary, that's it. There's a phrase in driving, stay in your own lane. Stay in your own lane, not my monkey, not my problem. Once you've gone to the wall, That's it. That's all you're accountable to do. Nothing more, but nothing less. Just go to that wall, okay? Some people will say, I don't care what people think of me. I am who I am. This is what I'm like. Take it or leave it. They're telling you that in some way they're not going to be caring. When they say that, this is me, take me as I am, they're telling you that they're not going to be caring in some way, and that's wrong. In all situations, you always have to demonstrate good form, good technique, okay? So caring is always good. Carrying, so over here we're on the right slide there with the blue and the turquoise, carrying is bad. It's bad form. So you could call it enabling, you could call it, in some way, codependency would go under this. I think it's a little different, but carrying is bad form. Caring is being responsible for how someone else feels or how they feel about themselves. As it says in your handout, it's being responsible for their happiness or being blamed for their unhappiness. Caring is being responsible for their problems, fixing their problems, owning their problems, working harder on their problems than the person themselves. That's what caring is when you're trying harder than they are to get it right. Okay? So that's always going to be a mistake when you're working harder than they are. So a healthy relationship is two people being caring with each other. That's a healthy relationship, whether it's in your marital relationship or with your parents or your siblings or coworkers. That's a healthy relationship. I do not have to make my wife happy. I just have to treat her well. I just have to be caring. She does not have to make me happy or please me. She just has to be caring, treat me well. I don't have to make my kids happy. I just have to be caring. They don't have to make me happy. They just have to be caring. I don't have to make my neighbors happy. I don't have to make my clients happy. I just have to be caring, and vice versa. Okay? Some people will say, well, okay, besides these traits, besides these qualities, like, how do I know where the line is? So here you go. Rule number 1, never work harder on a person's problem than the person themselves. Whatever the problem is, never work harder on a person's problem than they are. Number 2, while it's Christ-like to give the shirt off your back, never give your shirt to a person that has a closet full of shirts. Don't do it. Don't do for people what they can do for themselves. This one's going to sting a little bit, you guys, you people pleasers of this audience. Capable people have a hard time saying no. Just because you can fix it doesn't mean you should fix it. Capable people have a hard time saying no. Just because you can fix it doesn't mean you should. Yep.
How does no and caring go together at the same time?
How does what?
The word no and caring go together at the same time.
What do you mean by the word? Oh, no and caring. Okay. Okay. He asked, how does the word no and caring go at the same time? Okay. As long as you're caring, you get to say no. Okay? You say no to prevent you from being into carrying, from going too far. So, when I said capable people have a hard time saying no, just because you can fix it doesn't mean you should. I'm going to tell you this. From my perspective, God doesn't want things fixed. He could fix everything. He doesn't want things fixed. He wants people to grow. And when we're carrying, we're stunting our growth and the other person's growth. That's the problem. Okay? So, when somebody says, I want to talk about uncaring here a little bit. So back to the left. When somebody says, I'm not responsible for how you feel. I'm not in charge of your feelings. You're responsible for how you feel. Typically, when somebody says that, they've just been uncaring in some way. Mental health professionals do this a lot. So I'm so proud of my field. But they'll say something unkind, they'll be uncaring in some way, and then they'll say, but I'm not responsible for how you feel. You are. When you've been uncaring, you're responsible for how the other person feels. You're only not responsible for how they feel once you've been caring. At that point, your hands are clean. It's not your problem. So you want to always make sure you're caring, okay? Here's the problem. When you're carrying, whenever you're working harder on a person's problem than they are, whenever you're doing that, whether you know it or not, you've made a decision to feel three things. You'll feel resentment, you'll feel frustration, and you'll feel disappointed in the other person. You'll start to harbor resentments. Whenever you work harder on a person's problem than they are, you've made a decision to have hard feelings towards them. The problem is, and again, this part stings a little bit, when you've done so much for them, you're hoping that they're going to be pleased with it. They won't be pleased with it. They're going to have resentment, frustration, disappointment, and two other things. One of them's not on your handout. They're going to be ungrateful. They're going to be ungrateful, and they're going to be unhappy because you didn't make it better. You didn't solve their problem. So this whole idea that you're supposed to please them, and they believing that that's true, you're supposed to please them, you're both going to have hard feelings towards each other. And there's something I want you to write on your handout on the right side. I think most of you probably understood that gratitude precedes happiness. That before you can be happy, you first have to be grateful. You're never going to meet a grateful, unhappy person. They may say they're grateful, but they're not. They're just polite. You're never going to meet a grateful, unhappy person. You're never going to meet an ungrateful, happy person. Gratitude precedes, comes before happiness. What a lot of people don't know is that what precedes gratitude is investment. Investment precedes gratitude. Before somebody can be grateful, they first have to be invested. So when you cross the line, you're taking away their investment. You're doing their work for them. You're enabling them. Once you do that, they won't be grateful, they won't be happy, and now we got a relationship full of ingratitude, unhappy people. Okay?
So, in order to do something for somebody, you have to negotiate that that's something you're going to do, so they agree.
You're always 2 minutes ahead of me. You're good. You're good. He's like, hurry up, hurry up. It's not negotiating as much as you understanding who you're dealing with, okay? You have to know ahead of time who you're dealing with. So I have two types of clients. I closed my practice in December. So there's two types of clients. I call them client A, client B. That means you have family member A, family member B, or coworker A, coworker B, or neighbor A, or neighbor. There's two types. Client A comes into my office, and they're the caring type. They come in and they say, this is my problem, I just need some tools. I just need to know how to get out of this. And I can tell they're ready to go. Client B comes into my office, and I can tell they're there for the wrong reasons. They're not taking notes, they're not really listening. They're there because somebody else is making them, shotgun therapy kind of thing. And I can tell it's a complete waste of time, my time. I can tell it's a waste of their money. Like, it's just not going to be helpful. They can say they saw the counselor, but there was no learning going on. So client A comes in, I hear the problem, and then I give them my best. I give them my best. I go to that line. Client B comes in, I can tell it's a waste of time. I give them my best. I go to that line. Because that way, I don't have to feel guilt. I don't have to feel bad. My part is done. I used good form. I use good technique. They come back a week later, client A comes back and says, I'm doing better. I'm not out of the woods, but this is helping. Client B comes back and says, yeah, I didn't read the notes. I didn't take notes. I can't find the notes. You're not very good. I wouldn't recommend you to anybody. By the way, if you look up my reviews online, no client A's write me nasty reviews. Never. Only client B's. Oh, and they're nasty too, right? 16 diagnoses on one session, one lady wrote, one session. Wow, I was on a roll that day. Can you imagine that? The problem is this. When you cross the line for a client B, whenever you cross the line to rescue somebody, you made a decision to go short of the line for somebody else. Whenever you overdo it for somebody else, saving somebody, rescuing somebody, other people important to you, you're going to go short of the line for them. And they're going to be mad at you. And then you're going to feel like danged if you did, danged if you didn't, because now everyone's mad at you. And you don't want to play anymore. You just want to go be a hermit and just not be around people. And so by following this metaphor, by being caring, it allows you to maintain happiness, good self-esteem, as I have this talk about, like you can have joy, happiness, and again, no resentment. You don't have to have resentment. You can just have health in all of your relationships. And so when you cross the line for one person, you've made a decision to go short of the line for somebody else. I see you. Hang on there. You go short of the line. So you have to identify who your client B's are in your life, who they are. I'm going to tell you that 70% of people are probably client B, 25% are client A, that they don't want you to fix it. They just want to know that you're invested. They just want you to be invested, okay? And so when you try to do too much for one of those people, no, I got it. Like, I'm good. We're good, you know? And but client B are the ones that always want you to cross the line. And sometimes people, they will cross the line consistently for someone else, hoping that when they're down and out, that person will then reciprocate, kind of a tit for tat, quid pro quo. It's not that way. Once you cross the line for someone, you've taught them to not have to go to the line. So when you're having a rough day and you're hoping that they're going to look for you, it doesn't even occur to them because they've trained so long they've been trained so long to not have to do their part, that that's what they do. And then they just make a living finding other people that they can get to cross the line. Okay? So that's why I have people take notes. As a therapist, I had a clipboard, I had to take notes so that they could all be client A, so that they would be working as hard as me. Did I answer your question? Did I get it? I did okay? Okay.
Thank you. I heard the statement, if a person says, I don't care what you think about me, that demonstrates a level of uncaring. How would you differentiate that from the statement, I'm not going to base my self-worth on what someone else thinks about me?
Yeah, you ought to always care how you treat people. You always care how you treat people, but you're not to care what they think of you when you know you've treated them well. When you've gone short of the mark and they're upset with you, right? Well then, man, fix it, repent of it. So, for example, Ianthus says to me, James, that's an ugly shirt. Red is not your color. okay? And we can agree that that's not kind, that's not helpful, right? That's not caring. And I say to him, ow, what? I didn't see that coming from you. And he says, I'm sorry, I just had a migraine, and I had a rough night, and I drove here, and a policeman pulled me over and gave me a ticket. But I should not have said that about your shirt. Like, I should not have insulted. Like, I was wrong to do that. He's now come to the line. He's apologized. He's done all he can. If I don't want to forgive him, and I want to think of him as the hateful red shirt guy for the next 40 years, he's to not care. It's no longer his problem. He's done what he can to fix it. He's back to caring. I can decide whether or not I want to forgive him or not, but if I don't forgive him, that's my monkey, that's my rock. Does that help with that? So always care how you treat people. When you don't treat them well, the best apology, as you know, is positive change. It's improvement. You say you're sorry, and then you have the actions that mean that you're sorry, and then that's it. Your hands are clean again. I think there's a... Okay, I did see a hand.
I wrote something down to hopefully summarize what was said just now. So, ignore others crossing the line on you so long as you come short of crossing the line on others. Is that
You just got to say it just an octave louder. I thought I heard it, but I may not have.
Is this an acceptable summarization of that? Ignore others crossing the line on you so long as you come short of crossing the line on others?
No. Nobody should ever come short of the line.
No, he said come short of crossing.
Yeah, if someone... Yeah, you don't want anyone to cross it, right? But you don't also want them to come short of it either. Okay? And so once you've gone to the line, if someone is short of the line, you can say, hey, I don't think that was caring. I don't think that was kind. Right? But whether they change or don't change, that doesn't involve you. So another word for uncaring is aggressive. That's an aggressive style. Another word, in parentheses, another word for carrying is being passive. Being a people pleaser is being passive. When you're caring, go into the line, that's assertive. Okay.
What kind of questions can you ask yourself if you're convinced that you're like a client A kind of person, and in reality you're a client B person, and you need to self-identify so you can put it support?
Yeah, Client B people rarely ask, hey, am I a client A or client B? Yeah, they rarely will. They're just so convinced, okay? And but if you think you're a client B, ask a client A person, and they will let you know. Okay, so I give this example. Those of you that have kids or grandkids, and you have a box of 1,000 Legos, and you tell your kids, please don't dump out all 1,000 Legos. I'm so tired of picking up Legos. Like, I'm so tired of it. Just pull out the 100, 150 that you're going to play with. All kids lie. Your kids lie, your grandkids lie. They say, no, I promise, I'll pick them up. And they dump out all 1,000 Legos. When it's time to pick them up, they forget that promise. And you say, pick them up. You can say, pick them up, we had an agreement. They pick them up, we had an agreement. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just you being caring and asking them to be caring. That's not being aggressive. If you want to kneel down and help them pick up Legos, that's okay too. That's okay too. But never pick up more Legos than them, ever. Ever. If they pick up 5, you pick up 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1. If they pick up 500, you can pick up 500. Nothing wrong with that, but never pick up 501. Never earn someone's merit badges for them. Never write their homework assignments for them. Never, hey, will you be a pal and will you do? Nope. That's not asking me. When you're asking me to do what you can do, don't do it because you're bringing in resentment, frustration, disappointment. You're going to make it an unhealthy relationship. So in my second year of graduate school, in the second year, they assign you to teams. And over our team, so this is going back to your question about, because I thought I was at client A, and I had a professor point out how I was at client B. So I'm going to tell you I'm going to respond to your question. And this professor was the head of the program. I was assigned to his team, and he was the head of the entire clinical psychology program. In fact, it was my interview with him that made me have to go into a master's program first and not get elected and not get inducted into a PhD program to begin with, my interview with him. And he was a scary dude. I showed up to my interview with him all the way from LA to Texas in my suit, my briefcase and that, and he showed up to the interview with ketchup on his shirt, didn't want to do the interview that I flew all that way for, and he asked me where I was from. I said, I'm from Los Angeles, and he said, I could tell you a lot about people from Los Angeles. I thought, this is bad, and it was bad. So I was in a master's program. In my second year, he was my treatment team advisor, and you have to do 10 evaluations, and now you're not doing it on other students, now you're doing it on real people under their license. So this is professional work, and so I was doing testing and interviewing and all that stuff, and you got to do 10 of these. And I got one done, and I was waiting for him in the clinic in front of a lot of people, a lot of students as he's coming to the clinic, and I had it for him. And he said to me, as I handed him this 6-page typed report with all of my hard work, he said, Jim, is this your best work? And I said, it's quite good. He said, that's not what I asked. I asked you, is this your best work? And I said, I can't say that. And he handed it back to me, and he said, I only have time for your best work. In front of 40 other grad students. Like, I cannot tell you how embarrassing it was. But I did not realize it till that moment. But I'd never given my best on anything other than my mission. My dad was quite an outdoorsman. When I would struggle with fishing line and tangles and stuff, my dad fixed it. When I was botching my sewing assignments in my high school home ec, I'd have my mom fix it. When we were writing back for thank you cards for our wedding reception, I was supposed to write my half. Blythe did, most of them. I always came close to the line. So close that if anybody told me I hadn't gone to the line, I just would not have known it until that teacher made that point. And so I went back and I read some books and I studied some more, and 3 days later I turned him another report in his office. By the way, before I turned in that report, at that time I was 180 pounds and I had a resting heart rate of 60. Like, I was in good shape. I checked my pulse before I knocked on his door. It was 108. Like, I was scared. And he said, Jim, is this your best work? And he had papers and books everywhere. Like, his desk he was a busy man. And I said, it is. And he said, instead of, I'll get to it when I can, or I'm busy, he said, come back tomorrow afternoon, I'll have it ready for you. How's that for him being carried? Like, okay. So I went back the next day in trepidation. All the other students on my team, they waited a long time. They saw what happened to me. They waited a long time before they turned in their first one. I had turned in my 5th by the time they turned in their first. But I went back the next day, and he handed it back to me. And I'm telling you, like, it was the best thing I'd ever done. And he had a full 1/3 of it redded out in red ink. 1/3. Paragraphs erased, and then he had written other paragraphs on the sides and the margins, and he had all these arrows and stuff like that. And at the very top of it, he wrote, great work, underlined 3 times. And I thought he was mocking me. I did. And I thought, I've taken enough crap from this guy. And I said, great work, it's bleeding. And he said to me, hey, this is your first rodeo. I've been doing this a long time. I know what great work is. I just needed to know what you knew. I did not want to spend time teaching you stuff you already knew. I didn't want to do that. So now I know what your knowledge base is, and now I've increased your knowledge base. Make these changes, and you'll forever remember that. And then the next one, you'll make fewer and fewer. After 5 of those reports, he said, okay, you're not learning from these. Like, you're there. Now we got to find something more difficult like this. But that was the most loving thing I took with me from graduate school. That was the kindest. That's how we raised our kids. That's how we raised our kids. Don't ask me to work harder on a problem than the person that, We have 5 kids. We have 5 children, and we had a beautiful, she's with us. When we were 41, we had another baby. And we kind of thought we were done. Our 4th was 5.5 years old, but that little child, she may not remember this, but when she came in when she was, 3 or 4, she said, Mom, and all of her older siblings were there. She said, Mom, I can't find my shoes. And the oldest one said to her, if I find those shoes in 5 minutes, you're in trouble. And then the next sibling said, if I trip over your shoes, you're in trouble. And then the next one said something else. The next one said something else. All 4 kids had a response. They were kind of mocking me. They were quoting Dad. I was just sitting there grinning. Yep, that sounds familiar. That's familiar. You know what that cute little kid said? Hang on just a second. She went and found her shoes immediately. Go the line. Don't go past the line. You always go the line. Okay, we're good so far? All right. So I want to talk to you a little bit about something that I'm going to try to convince you of. And it goes in with what he was saying, what Addison was saying about in Moses, where we're created a similitude of my only begotten. We're made of the finest fabric. We're made of the best stuff. Okay? What human beings don't have the ability to be all those traits? Caring. Who can't be caring? Not do they want to, not want to, but who cannot be caring if they want to? It's a small group. If you were full-blown autism, not on the spectrum, but full-blown autism, maybe not. If you had profound retardation, maybe not. But you could have mild retardation, moderate, and do all of those. I'm telling you, 98% of all human beings have the ability to go that line. So whenever you cross the line for somebody to rescue them or enable them, save them, it's a condescending statement. You're telling them that you're better than they are and that they need you to be whole, that without your assistance, they can't be a whole person. It's not helpful. You're not being loving, not being kind. It's condescending. Never make another person feel like they can only be whole with your assistance. Go to the line, encourage them from the line, shout for the line, but you don't cross the line. Does that make sense? Don't ever make somebody feel like without your help, they're not enough. Because we're all made of the finest material, the finest fabric God could come up with. He came up with the best material. And those other cases where they have limitations, maybe some paranoid schizophrenia, maybe some full-blown autism, so, profound retardation, severe retardation. In my mind, from my belief system, they came here for a body. They're not here for their growth. They're here for our growth. They're already more developed than we are, no matter how long we live here. So, they're going to be fine in the next life. They're here for our development. Sir?
How would you characterize narcissistic personality on that scale?
How would I characterize what about personality? Narcissist personality. Well, a narcissist is going to just be aggressive. Narcissists are, there are no caring narcissists. Now, it is possible. As you look at this, you can tell that you can be one-on-one relationship and you can be caring in one relationship and uncaring in another. Like, you're not always but if your goal is to be caring in all relationships, that's your greatest ability to have joy, happiness, and good self-esteem. So here we go. What I'm going to try to convince you of is Heavenly Father, God, does not make cripples. I'm not referring to all the crippling diseases out there. I'm not. There's a lot of bad stuff out there, but I'm telling you, everybody has the ability to go to that line. And so when you cross the line for them, you're undermining them and you're hurting your relationship. Okay? God only makes good swimmers, right? People drown on purpose and they will drown you. They will blame you while they drown you. I would tell you that that's what now you know nowadays all men are narcissists, right? If you do a selfish thing and you're a male, you're a narcissist. So I get a little nervous with that term narcissist because everyone's diagnosing everybody. And most people that somebody else tells me they're not narcissists. Like if you look at the diagnostic criteria, they're just being inconsiderate. They're being aggressive or they're being selfish, but they're not like, so you got to be very careful with that. But that's like the woman that comes in and says, I'm crazy, I think I'm crazy. Only I get to use that word. I'll tell you when you're crazy. Like you don't get to use that word. So, but a narcissist is someone that they will drown themselves and they will drown you and blame you the whole time you try to rescue them. For sure. So, when somebody says to you, someone that you care about says to you, I'm really struggling right now. I'm really confused right now. I feel so lost. I don't know what to do. Like I don't know what to do. What is your tendency when somebody that you care about tells you that they're lost, confused, struggling, stressed, don't know what to do? What is most people's tendency that are here in this audience? What's most people's tendency? What's that? Yeah, try to comfort them. What can I do? How can I be of help? As soon as you do that, who's working on their problem? You are. As soon as you do that, you've now owned it. And they're going to sit back and watch you and give you a judgment on how you're doing, paying their bills, doing their chores, as soon as so when somebody says, what can I do? Or someone says you're stressed, they do all that. They're telling you that they're a cripple and they're putting it on you to fix it. So whenever someone says that to you, I want you to hit them with these magic words. You ready? It's not on your handout. What's your plan? By saying, what's your plan, it puts it back on their shoulders. I haven't even looked. I'm okay. You'll like let me know, right? I'm not even seeing a clock, right? Okay. What's your plan? What will they say 100% of the time? Those three words. It's like it's written on a bathroom stall. Like they all just, I don't know. You client A types, you're their plan. You were their plan. You sweet people, you were their plan. They were counting on you to fix it. And for some people, you're everybody's plan. It's like blood in the water for shark. They can see you a mile away. Client B's can spot you a mile away. I see them in the hallway at church all the time. They see me and they pick a different hallway. It's really funny. When they know they can't bully me. No, wait, there's more. No, they just pick a different hallway. Okay? So you say, what's your plan? And they're going to say, I don't know. And then you're going to say this. What have you tried? What ideas do you have? What thoughts do you have? It's going to become painfully clear they've done nothing. After all I've done, after nothing's working, well, what have you done? Those are empty words, flattering words we use to deceive ourselves. Book of Mormon stuff, right? Flattering words. I've done everything. Well, what does that include? It was nothing. It was nothing. I love to say this because I think I'm funny. I say, you're a capable person. I have confidence in you. Right? They're made of the best material. They're made of the best. I have confidence in you. They hate hearing that. They hate it. And then they say this. Well, I wish I had that confidence in myself. I swear it's written on the bathroom stall. Like they all say the same thing no matter the situation. And I say, you will. As you do more, as you get more involved, As you get more involved, that confidence will grow. But you don't rescue them. Always assist. Always assist. Okay? But don't cross over that line. Do you guys know the phrase, bending over backwards for somebody? I bent over backwards for you. Listen to it. When you say that, it means you did too much. Don't ever bend over backwards for anybody. Go to the line. Be a good Christian. Go to the line. Be caring. But don't ever bend over backwards for anybody. I dropped everything for you. Don't drop everything. Don't drop more than what they're dropping. You may drop some things, but don't drop everything, because as soon as you do it, now we're going to have this relationship that's full of resentment, frustration, disappointment. Okay? So when our oldest was in the 5th grade, she asked me for help with a math assignment. And I knew I could handle 5th grade math, and she got an F. So my wife and I came to an agreement that I was not allowed to help with math. But since I write reports for a living, anytime the kids had to write a report, I would be the parent to review it once it was written. Okay? And so one of our daughters, not this one, so she won't get embarrassed, one of our daughters, she was a straight A student in the 7th grade, and my wife, she made sure all those kids got good grades. Wife really handled all the school stuff. And but I came home, it was a Martin Luther King holiday, it was a Monday, I worked that whole day, I came home, and that kid had a report due the next day, and she had not worked on it. It was not like her to not work on it, but she put it off. Instead of going to bed at 9, she was starting a report that was due the next day. It was very unlike her. Like I said, good student, 12 years old, 7th grade. And my wife asked me, my wife said, she's struggling with her report. Why don't you help her? And I said, no. That's not the agreement, right in front of my daughter. And my wife tried to make me feel guilty. She then said, well, she might get a bad grade on it. And I said, I can live with it. First of all, it's so funny. I've not felt guilt since 1997. Like, I'm so good at being caring, and when I'm short of the mark, I'm so good at repenting. Like, I've not felt guilt since 1997. Like, trying to make me feel guilty, like, that's not going to ever work. It's the funniest thing. And I said, but it's her grade. Like, I can live with that. You know, and then she said, she might get a bad grade for the whole quarter. I said, I can live with that too. She's learning lessons in the 7th grade that I didn't learn until I was in college. I'm a really good dad. My wife walked down the room and just started to go do quilting, okay? And I was feeling pretty good about myself. I was watching TV, and there's my kid typing over on the computer. During commercial, I asked her, what's your report on? And she said, it's a biography. I thought, oh boy, I don't know anything about anybody. And I said, who's it on? And she said, Jimmer Fredette. And Jimmer Fredette was the National College Basketball Player of the Year at BYU. And as Addison said, I have a real thing for BYU. I know everything there is to know about Jimmer Fredette. Like, there's no treatment for it. Like, he has a stalking injunction against me. Like, I know Jimmer Fredette. And I told my daughter, bring your clipboard over here. She said, Dad, I just don't have enough facts. And I said, did you know this? She said, I did not. I said, did you know this? She said, I did not. I said, did you know this? I did not. I was just so proud of myself. There I was, not missing my show during commercial. There I was, just being caring. I wasn't being heartless, I wasn't being cold, but I wasn't writing her report. But I was assisting her and feeling good about it. She said, Dad, that's enough. I said, are you sure? I got more. Like, I know this topic. She said, I think that's good. The next day she went to school, and half the kids did not have reports done. And the teacher gave them an extra day to get it done. That's wrong. That punishes the kids that had it done. That's wrong. That's carrying, and they were always doing it in the school. They are always. Now, if she says, for you kids that didn't get it done, I'll give you one more day, but I want it to be 1 page longer. I'd like you to cite one additional source. I'll drop half a grade. There's all sorts of accommodations that you can make, but to move the line's not right. But my daughter said, I turned it in, and I feel good about it. I said, let me see what you did. Let me see where you, okay? But you don't ever cross the line. Because when you do that, you've made a decision to have bad feelings towards them, and they will have bad feelings towards you. I learned something. So oftentimes there'll be sign-up sheets for assignments at church, like setting up chairs on a Saturday, stuff like that, or different kind of projects. And I would put my name down, or Addison family down, even though it was not our assignment. We just to go help. Many hands make light work and stuff. What would happen is the client Bs, or the ward member Bs, that would see that we were going to be there, they wouldn't show up. So instead of us going to assist, we ended up doing someone else's responsibilities. Then my kids started to resent the service, which was, again, think of that. How many times you've gone to help somebody and you bit off more than you could chew? How many times did you think, this is not how it's presented? This is not how, right? So I learned, if you're a client A type, what I learned to do is I never, ever signed up. Ever signed up. I just showed up. We would just show up. And when we would just show up, but people didn't know we were going to be there, those client Bs, ward member Bs, were more likely to be there. And then it could be a good experience. It could be where we all feel good about it. So after working with those sex offenders for 3.5 years in physical abusers, domestic violence, I got really good at boundaries. And we moved down here in 1997, and we moved into a ward, and within 2 months, they made me elders quorum president. They put me in charge of 40 guys. And somebody would come to me on a Sunday and say, hey, we're moving next week. We're moving. Would you mind calling the fellas and having them help us move? And I'd say, I don't mind doing that. I'll make some calls. Like, I'm willing to do that. I said, I want you to invite your family and friends. And they'd say, sure, yeah, we'll do that. And then I would say this is really fun. I would say, what time do you want us there? They'd always say Saturday, 8 or 9. Yep, we'll be there. And I said, but this is what I'm asking of you. I need you to be completely boxed up and ready to go by the time we get there. 9 out of 10 members of any church will lie to you. Any church. They will tell you, oh, yeah, that's the plan. We'll try. We'll see what we can do, which means they had no intention whatsoever of being ready. And they want you to spend your entire day doing stuff that they could have done. Your entire day. And they didn't know me. I was new to the area. But the word was getting out about me. And I would say, I am so sorry, there's been a misunderstanding. Let me be clear. We're on the clock. We won't be there for more than 1 hour. I'll have enough guys there that we can fill a 25-foot van, the big ones, in less than an hour. I'll have that many guys there. But if you're not prepared at the end of the hour, we will leave your stuff in the street. And that's on you. Now, you guys, don't read people's expressions until you're a psychologist, but I know what they were thinking. What a butthole, right? Right? Or something worse. Sorry for the profanity. Sorry, I'm never going to be invited again. Well, that's the question. Who's being the jerk? Am I being the jerk because I don't want to be used? Or are they being the jerk because they want to use me or manipulate me? I'd say 1 hour. And then I would go to the fellas, the quorum, and I would say, who has 1 hour for me? And they go, oh, yeah. Come on, 1 hour. I will kick you off the site. Once they realized that I was not going to let them be used and that they weren't giving up time with their wife or kids or golf or whatever, everybody raised their hand. People love to help. That's Christianity. That's godlike. People love to help. They just hate to be manipulated. Well, once they knew that there was someone that was going to be the heavy, everybody came. I think that really, truthfully, some of those moves were more spiritual than the lessons. Like, We were known throughout the entire area, those moves. We were known through all of our assignments because it was always caring and caring. That's how we did that. And they were really good. Like to this day, people run into me, and it's been a long time. People see me, and they remember the feeling of those moves. Okay? So when my son was 5 years old, he got 15 gifts for Christmas, including a $90 remote control race car set. Like, his older sister got 6 gifts, his younger sister got 6 gifts. Like, their Christmases were fine. His was obscene. And it was relatives. It wasn't us, it was relatives. And I didn't know what to say. Like, I didn't know what to say, but it was too much. I didn't know what to say. And those sweet girls, older and younger than him, they didn't even complain. Like, I couldn't believe it. They just watched him, and he opened gifts for a full hour after they were done, right? And then, after a full hour, he then said, what did he say? That's what he said. Yeah. I sold him into Egypt. I didn't know that was going to be my only son. That was a mistake. Was he pleased? Was he happy? Should he have been pleased? You cannot please another person. You cannot make another person happy. You can't do it. Don't try. The next year he got 6 gifts for Christmas, and he was thanking us clear into July. So obviously we taught gratitude. So.
What about with the poor? What about with helping the poor?
Yeah, I think you help the poor because you're wanting to do the right thing. But there's a difference between poor and being manipulated. There's a difference between, and so you want to make sure that your feeling in your heart is right, that you're doing out of compassion for the other person, that you're not doing it for guilt, you're not doing it for manipulation. And so when someone, like again, client B's, they're an expert at trying to make you feel bad when you've done nothing wrong. When you get the phone call, and Brother Addison, and the water's rising, and the carpet's flooded, and everybody I've called, like, no one's coming. It's Brother Addison. No one's coming. It's like, who did you call, sweet lady? Give me their names. Who did you call? Who ignored your pleas? They hadn't called anybody. They hadn't called anybody. They said, oh, wait, someone's at the door, bye, and they hang up. So I think you have to, it's a case-by-case situation, and you want to be prayerful about it. Like, sometimes I'll see somebody on the side of the street, and I'll go give them money. Other times I don't, depending on the situation, what's going on. And you have to do what you think is right. But I rarely feel bad for adults. I almost always feel bad for kids in unfortunate situations, and sometimes maybe you end up enabling an adult because there's kids involved. I think people use their kids that way a lot of times as chips. But I rarely feel bad about adults because whatever situation they're in, they're not there because of one bad choice. They're there because of thousands of choices. And you're not going to fix it. But you do want to be supportive. You do want to be loving. You don't want to be judgmental, but you don't have to cross over. Yeah, I think if you give $100 to somebody and you're thinking, get a job, you jerk, it wasn't a good gift. If you give them $5 and you think, I hope this is helpful, I hope this helps, I think it's where your heart's at. So, Blythe doesn't know I'm going to use this story, but 5 years ago, I came home on a Thursday evening, and I'd done a pretty good job of not bringing work home. Like, I've been pretty good at being able to shut that off. But I just finished a couple situations that I could have made better, like a young couple, and they made a decision that they were going to end it. And I really thought that they didn't need to end it, and they were going to regret it. I thought that they were abandoning good partners just because it was hard. And I came home, and at the end, and those were 4 10-hour days, 12 hours, like I was tired. And this one had an effect on me. And Blythe came to greet me, came to give me a hug, and I thought, I don't know that she always understands how hard it is. As much good, all the good she does, I don't think she knows how hard it is, that people's lives are in my hands and kind of how heavy it is. She went to hug me, and I said, don't hug me. Like, you can't touch me. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, but I'm on one. Like, I just got to just take a second. And I'm a touchy-feely guy. Like, don't bet on me turning down a hug ever or an embrace. I like to be touched, but I said to her, like, I'm sorry, I can't. And she said to me, well, I don't know what it is you go through each day. I know it's hard, and I'm grateful that you do it. Whatever it does to you, I'm grateful that you do that for the community. I know I don't get it, but I am grateful for that. And then she said, because I told her, you can't make it better. This is on me. And she said, and I did make peanut sauce. She makes the best peanut sauce in town. And I started to smile a little bit. And she said, and Shelby made chocolate chip cookie dough. And I said, I changed my mind. Like, I'm feeling better already. Now, they weren't carrying. They didn't cross the line. They were just being kind, loving, protective. They were respectful. But they weren't trying to fix it. They weren't going across. They just wanted to let me know that they were invested in me. They didn't then do this thing, this thing, this thing. All right. So why do a lot of people carry? What is the emotion that people that carry, that cross over, what's the emotion that they dislike more than resentment, frustration, and disappointment? What is their least favorite emotion? Guilt. People hate feeling guilt, and they would rather have resentment, frustration, disappointment than feel like they could have done something, should have done something, and they didn't do it. As capable as you are, every one of you, who is more capable than you and never feels guilt? Christ. Christ and God. They don't ever feel guilt, and then they're more capable than us, because remember what I said earlier, I tried to convince you of, God doesn't want things fixed. He just wants us to grow and help the growth of others. I think that's what the conference is about. Is that right? Okay. But he doesn't want things fixed. He just wants us to grow. Right? And have joy. Men are, that they might have joy. Okay? We're good there? All right. Questions about that? Concerns about that? Any questions? Bud?
You're a great storyteller.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Sir?
Can you give a couple more examples? It's a little bit unclear about when you're crossing the line.
You know you're crossing the line when you start to have kind of some hurt feelings, disappointment feelings, frustrated feelings, and when you can tell that you're more invested than they are. You can tell this is a different story, but a lot of people really have a fear of being controlled, and they don't want to be controlled, and they go so far as to not invest. So when I'm teaching caring, I'm just telling you to be invested, because investment precedes gratitude, precedes happiness. For you businessmen and women, it's what you call skin in the game. You gotta have that investment. When you're the only one investing, and by the way, all client Bs, they're gonna tell you that they're fully invested, right? Oftentimes they're married to a client A. Those guys that were mad at me, that I was not gonna give my whole Saturday to helping them, were usually married to a lady that thought, I wish I could get them to do for me what Dr. Oz like. Client A's oftentimes will, again, I was a small client B when I first got married, not knowing it, but having people do stuff I was capable of doing. And if it had been pointed out, the lesson didn't catch until Dr. Terrell, hey, don't make me teach you things you already know. And we raised our kids that way. You know you have to repeat many, many things to the kids a lot of times, and that's okay. But sometimes you get to say, you know that, like, you know that one. Like, that one you know. Like, don't ask me to. When you have scoured your room for 15 minutes, can't find your shoes, then employ us. But don't ask us to go just work for you. We will work with you, we'll assist you, but we won't work for you. Okay? So I come home. Do you want another example? Can I give you another example? Okay. So I come home and I'm thinking, man, I would really like to be intimate tonight. And Blythe is thinking, I sure hope James doesn't approach me. Every bone in my body is hurting, right? And she's made me my favorite dinner, my favorite dessert, right, and my favorite movie. And I said, hey, we're having such a good time. Let's go in the back room. And she tells me, no. And then I say to her, you don't love me. I don't feel loved by you. I don't feel like word games. I don't feel like you're invested in me. My favorite dinner, my favorite dessert, my favorite movie. Who's she been thinking about all day? Man, she loves me. She just didn't please me. She just didn't make me happy. She doesn't have to do that. If she crosses the line and says, well, I guess I don't have a migraine headache, it's just a tension headache. My whole body's not numb, just half my body. I'll take one for the team. We'll see what I can do. She will resent me, and I won't be grateful an hour later. So when I try to manipulate and soul compound, put on her face, whatever, she's to say, don't do that. She's to tell me, no, don't do that. Just be grateful for the great night we had. Like, just be grateful. Like, I know where you live, you know? I'll find you. But don't look up porn. Don't call Susie. Like, behave. Like, show a little gratitude. Like, and so always be caring, but when you're asked to prove it, make them jump through hoops and prove it, then that's not investment, that's control. Does that help? Okay. And there's other examples. I'm trying not to use all of them in the book so that it's fresh stuff. Yes?
Over there, he's trying to get you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Is that you?
Yes, it is.
Hello, bud.
I just want to know, do you have like some good tips or on how to practice being more caring? Like, because obviously these things make sense, but you have any good tips on how to practice?
Yeah, I think every day you make sure that you can recite all of those qualities. When you wake up in the morning, make sure that you have it memorized like that, like it was the Scout Law. I think every morning know that you know those by heart. And if you know those by heart in the morning, at noon, during lunch, in the evening, I promise you, you are going to be caring during the day. But if you remember 4 of them, good luck. Right? Like, so if you know all of those, I think that's a great tip. Again, when you think you're client A, you can go talk to somebody that you know is a client A, not to point fingers or anything, and say, how am I doing as a son or as a husband or as a, you know? The daughter that helped me do the slides, aren't those good slides? I'll tell her you like her slides. I can't do anything with it. I can barely turn on my phone. In fact, sometimes I can't do that. And, but I ask her, are there ways that you can see that I could be a better husband? Are there ways you could see I could be a better? But I never ask the relatives or friends. They're the B's. The B's will have a long, long list for you. A long list. And that's not a list that Jesus would agree with. So you ask the A's. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, bud.
Hey, I'm curious about your interpretation of when Jesus asked someone, or when Jesus said that someone asked you to go a mile, go 2 miles with them. I really like this concept that you're teaching us, and I want to understand your interpretation of what Jesus meant by that.
Yeah, going 2 miles is going to the line, going to the wall. I think that his belief was that when somebody said we've done enough, my guess is that oftentimes people think back to his question, I think a lot of times people think, I've done enough, I've carried, and they're a little bit short, like I thought, until Dr. Terrell kind of. So if you're going the extra mile, you can go the extra mile and still not outwork somebody. Going the extra mile is just sure, you're just making sure that you've done all of those qualities. 2 of the qualities that I find very, think about how much help your people would be if they're not just, people are really good at the self-service, the A's, but are we teachable? Are we humble in our relationships? Do we allow our partner to teach us? Do we learn from them? I think that's a key one that a lot of people don't focus on. I tell kids that are struggling with their parents, have you learned every good thing that you can? Okay, I'm going to finish this thought. I can do it in 20 seconds. Have you learned every good thing you can from your parents that you're struggling with? Have you learned every good thing? Have you learned every good thing from your wife that you can learn? Has she learned every good thing from you? Like that to me, if you're, because if you're trying to learn every good thing and then they're willing to learn every good thing from you, you've both gone to the boundaries. Thanks for your patience. I'm going to be in the back. If you want to ask questions, I'm not going to be breaking. But thank you very much. I've enjoyed this. You okay? Oh, my.
You're good.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're just fine.
Last time I looked, it was 33.
Yeah. I'm going to just announce to these guys. So we're going to break for lunch for 1 hour. I do want to start right on time at 1 o'clock. While we're out to lunch, like Dr. Addison said, he would be here and he can answer questions and visit with people or whatever. He's not going to leave. But go grab some lunch if you need to, or just hang out here. When we get back after lunch, will you all please let's move forward as much as possible so that we can see these slides a lot better. Okay? Thank you.
Is that okay?
It's perfect.
We're good?
It's beautiful.
All right.
Thank you.